Previously, we had made a record called Love Hurts, which was a lot of covers, and it was recorded at the Loft in Chicago, the Wilco Loft. Wonderful experience, quick record. Made the record in really just like a day, a couple takes of everything. And it sounds that way. It sounds immediate. It sounds kind of rambunctious in a way that I think is interesting. But also, I'm using one of Jeff Tweedy's old Gretches through an old Gibson amp, so it's a darker, kind of fuzzier tone. So in other words, that to me in many respects is like a capture of a really specific set of circumstances. Band's first record, new studio, new equipment, other people's songs. Going into Squint, though, I think we all had an awareness that if given the opportunity to be very deliberate about the sound, that we probably do things a little differently. Not to say better, just differently. For one, unlike Love Hurts, Squint was us all in one room together, actively looking for bleed that made, that was musical. This has two backstories. Well, the first is Don Was, who runs Blue Note Records, is an incredible musician and producer and just creative force. He and I had discussed this notion a lot, that bleed can be great. It can be a mess, but it can also be amazing. And we shared a similar love for that sound on record. So first thing was I had Don in my head thinking, okay, let's get that thing on tape. We're playing improvised music. We're an ensemble. I want this to congeal. I almost want it to feel like a record recorded in mono. There was a period where we heavily considered it being a mono record. But there were virtues to the stereo that just seemed too good to pass up. The second backstory is really, I think, quite profound to me. It is the relationship that at that time was kind of budding with our engineer, Mark Goodell. And Mark is a brilliant engineer, musician, producer, also, like Don, a creative force who we've been lucky enough to tour around the world with as our front of house engineer. His connection to music is such that he's basically the fourth member of the trio. That's how we all kind of understand it to be. Because the live show, though it's not a total spectacle, so to speak, it still toes this line of actively drawing the listener or the audience member's ear to different things at different times. Sure, it's three people, but sometimes it's really driven by the bass or the guitar or the drums or the interaction between any configuration of us. And it's a juggling kind of thing, and Mark natively understood how to do that, but also had such strong and clear visions about how we could translate that into rock clubs. We were playing mostly larger room, standing room venues, outdoor venues, places where you would think nuance would kind of, disappear. Mark made it so that it not only didn't disappear, but it was enhanced. It was almost like the band started to feel most comfortable when we were in a big room. Notes on the guitar would sing with very little effort. The drums sounded compressed and beautiful and kind of thunderous, but delicate. The bass was clear, but also very healthy, kind of hearty. A lot of these attributes, which frankly I associate with very quiet music. It's the middle ground that's dangerous, where you're kind of pushing to be louder, but your volume actually isn't that high. So you lose nuance, but you don't gain this kind of like all-encompassing sound pouring over you experience. So Mark is the engineer of that concept for the band. Back again to Squint, we said that's how we want to make this record. So you're hearing Mark's sense of bleed, Mark's sense of each of our individual sounds, and you're hearing a very intimate setup, but turned up. Squint proved that we could take our vision sonically, we could take our vision creatively with this trio, we could apply it to original music, and we could just really have a point of view about it. It was a blast. It was amazing. It came out so well. We were so happy with it. View with a Room, which is the record we made after Squint, is essentially the same concept. Frizzell was with us, so the way the quartet, 4 people interact in a room, amps in the room, everything in the room, it's different than the trio thing. It's a different image. It's a little bit wider, but it's also a little more focused. Squint kind of sounds wild, and there's some tendrils that kind of fly out here and there. View with the Room is a little more contained. Essentially, it was the same concept. Come in with a rehearsed band, try to get first takes if you can, mix it, so that it sounds like a record and not like a demo. And I'd say one of the big additions is on both. One of the things you'll hear pointedly on View with a Room and a follow-up record that was made at the same time called The Layers, is the influence of Armand Hirsch, who's a longtime friend of mine, collaborator, wonderful producer, guitarist, drummer in New York. On View with a Room especially, there are places throughout a lot of the music, all but a few songs, where he is adding extra production elements. They could be things like the snare drum that you're hearing is actually the original snare drum plus the same snare drum down an octave and mixed in just to give a little bit of heft. Or there might be things where there's a little more ambience and it's the reverb tail of my guitar sound being mixed in as kind of on a loop in the background. Really subtly, but if you heard it without it, it would sound very different. It's just a way to kind of blur the lines. It was done on a song called Quiet Like a Fuse, which is on Squint as well. I think that was a standout track to me, and so we wanted to go deeper with that. And you hear it especially on songs like Fairbanks, Auditorium, and on the new record, The Layers. It's pretty much all three of the band tracks. You'll hear a lot of exploration from Armand. The process for Squint, View with the Room, and The Layers were similar. As far as composition, I tend to write a lot and then whittle it down when a record is on the horizon. And in all three cases, it was about quantity over quality. It was like write as many tunes, and if 90% are bad, but there's 10% that are usable, those are pretty good odds, When it came to recording View with the Room, I had whittled, I think it was like 35, 36 songs down to 16. I said, this is a 16-song book of music. And as we rehearsed and recorded, it became clear that this was either going to have to be turned into a double record because they all came out well, or we would have to kind of space them out, like pick the best 10 that made one storyline, and then find a place for the other 6. And we went with the option B. The interesting thing to me is that the songs that comprise View with the Room are predominantly songs. They're very form specific. They have a certain number of choruses in them. They have in many respects, they have kind of like a verse and a chorus modality. And then the 6 that were left off were equally strong, but lean more into atmosphere. They're ambient. There's 3 acoustic pieces. One's a duet with Frizzell, one's a duet with Jorge, and one's a quartet with 2 acoustic guitars, bass, and drums. And those are probably the most song-like ones, but still kind of droney, kind of like they set a mood and they leave it. The other 3 are all with the band, playing electric, 2 electric guitars, bass, and drums in Armand. And they are, rolling rubato, or they have, group improvisation that's kind of atmospheric for a long period of time, punctuated by these kind of anthemic melodies, kind of bookended by them. It's almost just a different palette compositionally, a little less succinct. But to my sensibilities, I enjoy how those 6 songs, have a connection to one another, but as a listener, they also just wash over me in a different way. And I was thrilled that they had that in common, because then it made sense to say, well, The Layers is that thing, and View with the Room is this other thing. And taken as a whole, you kind of get the full picture of what those 3-4 days were like in the studio. The Layers is almost like a prequel. You hear a little bit of everything on View with the Room, but you hear it in a different, earlier stage.